Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily podcast. I'm going to let you into a little secret here. Talking to the biggest names in tech every single day on this podcast does not make my wife think I'm the coolest husband in the world. Far from it. But when I said I was speaking to the people at Nextdoor today, she suddenly sounded interested. And for those of you that don't know, Nextdoor is an app where you connect to the neighbourhoods that matter to you. So you can receive trusted information, give and get help, get things done, and build real-world connections with those nearby. Neighbours, businesses, public services, etc. And I suspect there's a lot of you that use the app called Nextdoor. But today, Emma Mondolino, the head of Nextdoor Create, the sales and marketing and strategy group at Nextdoor, is going to be joining me on the podcast. She's focused on creating value for brand partners, building bespoke campaigns, etc. And she also has a fantastic backstory. Before she joined the Nextdoor team, she worked at Pinterest in both sales and marketing. And prior to her time there, she was also a foundational member of the brand strategy team at Twitter. But I've invited Emma on the podcast today to talk about the trend towards localism and also what this means to the team at Nextdoor and how localism works at scale, especially when they have 75 million users around the world. As the world opens back up, I find myself going to more and more tech conferences around the world, and my son is currently working in Southeast Asia right now. We got talking about how we watch TV has completely changed, and it often feels like there's so much TV and yet nothing to watch, and that is very often caused by archaic regional settings that determine what you can and what you cannot see. So I'm currently checking out White Lotus, Severance, and I cannot get enough of The Last of Us, which is probably because of that delayed gratification thing. But I'd love to hear more about what TV shows you recommend, how you watch them, and how you access the most content possible. And after looking for a reliable VPN, I decided on Private Internet Access, which is the world's most transparent VPN provider. They have 30 million downloads, and PIA has servers in 84 countries in all 50 states. But as someone that binges my way through countless box sets, the fact that Private Internet Access works on all major streaming services so that you can access more content than ever, wherever you're located in the world, that was a big win for me. And there are also apps available for all operating systems, and one subscription can protect up to 10 devices at once. And if that's something that you're in the market for, please head to piavpn.com/techtalksdaily and get an 83% discount. Yes, that's 83%, which works out at just $2.03 a month. Plus, you get 4 extra months completely free. But to activate it, you must go to piavpn.com/techtalksdaily. One last time, piavpn.com/techtalksdaily, and let me know what TV shows you recommend by emailing me at techblogwriter@outlook.com. So buckle up and hold on tight, because no matter where you're listening in the world, I'm going to beam your ears all the way to New York, where Emma is waiting to share her story. So a massive warm welcome to the show, Emma. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. My name is Emma Mondolino, and I currently run a group called Create at Nextdoor. It is effectively our creative strategy and revenue marketing group. Former to being here, I was at both Pinterest and Twitter, always connected to the sales and revenue side of the house, but also always connected to creative and marketing roles. And I took some of my history from them when I came here to create this group called Create, basically to pull together both the marketing and sales side and be able to do great things with advertisers on cool technology platforms.
Awesome. And you mentioned some pretty big names in tech there, Pinterest, Twitter, and obviously Nextdoor as well. But I'd love to take you back in time for a moment. Can you remember where your passion for tech came from, or just a moment that would put you on this path you're on today? Because I feel like there's an origin story here, right?
Sure. So I think my passion for tech really came from my passion for storytelling. I've always been fascinated by a great story. I'm one of those types of people that I get really engaged if someone is saying something interesting. I'm a forever eavesdropper. I come to you from New York, where there's great eavesdropping all over. And I think as I was in university and as I was figuring out what to do with my life, I always thought that there was just great stories to be uncovered. And technology has been such a huge part of that. I think if we look at how much the world has connected through technology, being able to discover stories, places, all of that has really happened through tech. And so I was really interested in how to find stories and tell stories with it. So it was really the love for storytelling that pulled me to it. And then, of course, finding out how you do that in technology led me to the advertising and branding space. So always looking there. And then social platforms, I mean, talk about being able to connect people and discover, that was the way to go. So I just kept chasing them and seeing what was out there and new.
Wow, what a great story. Absolutely love that. And of course, it would be that path that led you to Nextdoor, which is a neighborhood network used by, I think it's something like 1 in 4 households here in the UK. And I know in the US, it's much, much bigger. You're on the New York Stock Exchange and got a huge following over there. But can you tell me a little bit more about the story behind the company and ultimately the problems that it set out to solve with tech too?
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, we are in 1 in 4 households in the UK. We're about 75 million verified users around the globe in 11 different countries. So we're definitely we're connecting a lot of neighbors at this point. The origin story of Nextdoor is almost a little bit of the anti-social originally, but making social come back. So what do I mean by that complicated statement? We connect neighbors that live within proximity to one another so that they can connect both online and offline. So many social platforms connect you based on interest, and you might not know people, and it becomes a little bit anonymous. And the goal of Nextdoor was actually to bring us back into real life and connect people that know each other. And so you can find each other online based on proximity, but then really have this opportunity that anyone you're talking to online lives very close by to you so that you could connect and do in real life things. And our original founders had just done a lot of research on how human connections had started to kind of falter. And people were, while with these opportunities to be more connected, really become disconnected. So the platform's goal was to bring us back together.
I love that. And I always say on this podcast every day that technology works best when it brings people together. And that's exactly what you're doing here. So can you tell me a little bit more about this new trend towards localism as well and why that's got you excited about this new Nextdoor opportunity?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll give you another bit of a flashback. So I have been at Nextdoor now for about 5.5 years, which I think feels like a bit of an eternity in tech if we think about how much changes in that period of time. And what drew me here was the local aspect. I think there's so many different platforms that have explored connections based on interest and so many different things, but there wasn't one that had really nailed local. And I love the idea of pulling people back together. And that is something that we have stuck true to over the 5.5 years that I've been here and before me, and what we'll continue to grow towards. And I think it really was the pulling folks back together in real life and to make sure that we're not losing that. And so we were building a platform around that. Then the pandemic hit. And I think what we knew, the rest of the world came to see really clearly, which was that you really need the people around you, especially when you're in the circumstances that we were in. And so we continued to build for local to make sure that the platform is focused on just what's happening around you. There's always relevancy in that, right? We might be totally different fans of different teams, and we might have totally different jobs, and we might have totally different backgrounds. But if we pass by the same restaurant on a block that's between where we both live, that restaurant is relevant to both of us, and we both want a recommendation to know if it's a good spot or not. And so the idea of localism and us focusing on local is that everything around you has some relevancy, and being able to pull that into a platform where it's accessible and allow you to act on that. And so everything that we have done as we continue to build and grow the platform has really been focused on that aspect. And I think it makes us really unique. I don't think there's anyone else in the space that tried to focus on the small and focus on local to scale. They tried to go big. And as a result of that, you have a lot of scale, but you lose some of those personal connections that we've really stayed true to. And I think that's really the power of localism.
And I love how you seem to have got that balance just right, because with 75 million users all around the globe, a question I've got to ask is, how does localism work at scale? How do you do that?
Yes. Well, we've had a lot of practice in trying.
Yeah.
So when Nextdoor launched, originally it took quite a bit of time to scale from neighborhood to neighborhood because you are going small, but we really stuck with it and the patience really paid off because you can't rush that. You have to really stay true to local communities and you need to be able to make sure that you're focused on what they need. Once we picked up the knack for how to scale from neighborhood to neighborhood, we started growing much, much faster. And really, the trick is to be able to templatize what you need in a neighborhood. So all of the tools, the primary part of Nextdoor is our feed. So when you get onto the platform, you're able to see what's going on around you. We then have a Discover tab that shows you a map view of what's happening around you. And that's something that we can mimic in each neighborhood and surrounding neighborhoods. So once you get the tools right for each local neighborhood, you then just need to keep pushing that out and driving more awareness. And it works for each neighborhood, even if they're slightly different. So that's really was the point, is nailing how to give you the best platform for what's around you and then just keep growing it. The other part of it was figuring out how we can help our partners, in our case, advertisers, also be able to enter those conversations with authenticity. And so we've done a lot for local personalization, being able to pull in a specific neighborhood name or being able to showcase a local store employee who you might see when you walk into your local store. Things like that we've been able to build these locally personalized tools that are built to feel really local and relevant to a neighbor, but also be easy to access for the larger brands, partners of the world that want to be able to enter into those spaces.
And I am conscious we will have a lot of people listening all around the world. So for those international listeners that might just be hearing about Nextdoor for the first time, can you just tell me a little about what Nextdoor is, how it works, maybe share a use case just to bring what we're talking about to life here?
Sure. Paint a picture of this platform we're actually talking about, of course. So when you join Nextdoor, you can think of it as a neighborhood hub for trusted connections and exchange of helpful information, goods, and services. That is the way that we describe ourselves. What does that really mean? So the app, as you open it and enter it, you will be put into a feed that has neighbor conversations about what's going on around you. So think things like that restaurant recommendation that I mentioned. If a book club is popping up, perhaps there is a dog park that recently had a renovation done that was long overdue. It's also things for folks that only those close by to you can help with. Maybe that dog of yours got out. The people that you want to talk to the most are the ones that live nearby. If there is an unfortunate natural disaster of sorts, you also want to be able to reach out to folks for help. But then it's also for just some of the basic day-to-day things too, that you need a service recommendation or you're looking for a trusted babysitter. We also have a marketplace where you can post things for sale or you can buy things from those that live close by to you. It is a lot easier to buy a bed frame from someone who lives 3 blocks away than someone that lives 3 counties away. So there are all of these different pieces on the platform for you to be able to see what's happening directly in the neighborhoods around you. And you can choose those boundaries, whether it's your direct neighborhood or perhaps neighborhoods that are a bit further out. We won't let you go much further than that because you then lose the relevancy. And we also want to protect the neighborhood that you're in for privacy and to make sure that that really stays within the bounds of your neighborhood. And so that is what you'll find when you join on the platform, just being connected to all of those neighbors around you.
And for all the startup founders and techies and tech teams listening around the world, if we were to take a peek under the hood, can you tell me a little bit more about the technology that makes all this happen and makes it possible for you guys to serve 75 million people around the world?
Sure. Well, I rely on a few very, very smart and very driven engineers that we have around the place, but I can tell you about what I do know, which is the thing that we are the most focused on is confirming your home address when you sign up for the platform. So we are not interested in where you might be traveling to or where your phone is. We are interested in where you live. And so we make sure that we confirm your address, and then we're able to give you access to that neighborhood that we have defined around you. And as we've grown the platform, some neighborhood boundaries have shifted where neighborhoods become much bigger, or there there are so many different people where we'll break up some neighborhood lines. But again, you're able to have access to your direct neighborhood and those surrounding. Perhaps when you lose your dog, you are most interested in those directly close by to you, but maybe you're selling something and you're interested in those that are directly close by, but also going a bit further. So you have a bit more access there. And the other magic of the platform in making sure that we're around that confirmed address point is that you don't need followers. So the platform isn't built in a way where you join and we ask you lots of questions about your interests or ask you who you know to try to make sure that you have something in your feed. We've already done that for you because your neighbors are effectively who make up this platform. So we don't need to rely on a follower model or have that built. The other really interesting part of the platform, I think, in the tech behind the curtain, is what we're doing to help neighbors understand how to speak to each other and how to engage. There is so much going on right now in terms of technology and brand safety and learning how to speak to one another and be kind, which is a real principle that we have. And so with both human moderation and AI moderation, we've really doubled down on healthy and productive dialogue on the platform. So whether it's recognizing if someone may have had said something a bit snippy, to give them what we call a kindness reminder that says, are you sure you wanted to say that? Perhaps you could say it this way. We also put out a lot of tools proactively that just help you know how to foster great and authentic conversations with neighbors. And that's another piece that we'll continue to focus on, which I think is a really major one and one that we feel really strongly about.
And as a slight side note around localism, especially for people interested in MarTech or any marketers listening, can I ask you to expand on why there's a lot of CMOs now are moving budget from regional to focus on more targeted hyperlocal audiences? Because there seems to be a bit of a trend there, right?
I love that they're doing that. I certainly think so. Yeah. I think it's for personalization. So I think it goes to more of what we're doing that's interesting in our tech and also more of what we need. I think consumers are the smartest they've ever been because we've given them so many tools. I mean, you can access anything and everything. You can discover a review for anything from anyone across the globe, right? But I think that when you are trying to be a brand right now in any space, whether it's in any medium, whether it's TV or digital, anywhere, you are trying to connect and be authentic. And I think that's really hard these days because consumers have seen it all. They've seen all the gimmicks. They still love a deal, but more than a deal, they want to know what you're doing for sustainability purposes. They want to know what you're doing for social causes. They want to know what your brand stands for. Who are the people behind the brand? And that's really difficult. And I think what local can do is that you're able to slot in and feel like you are part of something close to your consumers. You're part of their neighborhood. You're part of their home. And it feels like you're taking a note of what they really need. So that can be as basic as a retailer who comes onto Nextdoor and says the closest store is X miles away from your home, or giving you local deals that are relevant specifically to a larger retailer down the street. It can be a financial brand who is involved in many different, corporate social responsibility initiatives and foundations, but maybe they have them all listed on their site, but there's so many that you never really feel like it's about you. Instead, for us, we can help highlight the ones that are locally relevant. What are the initiatives they have done at local branches or foundations that are very specific to one place? So we can bring out the really authentic and meaningful work that they're doing to be great brands in a way that's relevant and makes sense and puts that forward. And I think that's why CMOs are taking more of a note of local, and then especially local at scale, because you do still have budgets that you need to make work for you and have expanded reach to be able to highlight those messages. And then I think your general brand dollars and some of the great spots that have been created, the great advertising campaigns that have been created, they then have more clout because people have more of a connection to your brand and think you are the authentic brand that you've said you are.
And I've got to ask, as someone that's working right in the heart of this space, are there any particular tech trends that excite you, anything you're monitoring, and what's going to be your big focus this year?
Yeah, so I have what I'm excited about for Nextdoor, and then I have what I'm excited about for me.
Yeah.
Why don't we start with me? I've been giving you a lot about Nextdoor. I think the chat GPT and the chatbots are great. And I will tell you why. One, I think they're fantastic for just how smart they've become. But I also think there's just such potential for learning. Asking a question, and I think sometimes we don't know what we want to ask. The way that technology is changing that and able to just create something so quickly, I think the AI there is really phenomenal. And I think that there are so many different integrations to use that. And I'm very excited to see where it will go, what platforms will take it up, and where it will get ingrained. But I think there is so much to come there. I think I've had too much fun playing around with some of it recently. So I think that side to me is really exciting. And then for Nextdoor specifically and broadly, I think what we're doing with maps and visuals is especially exciting. There have been many different map-based technologies in the past. Waze is certainly one that comes to mind, that interactive maps while you're on the move. I think we all love a good visual. It's much more fun to show versus tell. And with what we've done with local and proximity, we are going to focus a lot more on our maps and our Discover tab to be able to show you what's going on around you and also allow you to engage. So we have a couple of seasonal based maps. One of them is our trick or treat map, where you're able to mark your home around Halloween if you're handing out candy. And you can imagine what else we could do with that. Perhaps you could mark your home in the future if you are taking part in a food drive. You could mark your home if there is an event going on. You can have different businesses mark if they have events going on in our new events map. And just being able to use the map much more than we have and build out a real engagement tool there. And I think there are, like I said, plenty of maps around, but I don't think anyone's really doubled down recently on what we can do there. And so I'm excited to see what Nextdoor will be able to do. I think it's another space that we can really own and do right.
Well, I know you're incredibly busy, and I cannot thank you enough for spending a little time with me today and sharing your insights. I'm going to see if there's something we can do in return for you now, because some of the biggest names in business, VC funding and tech have either been guests or listened to this podcast. So if there was one person that you'd love to have a private breakfast or lunch with, who would that be and why? Because he or she might just hear this. So let's see what we can manifest together today.
I love that. How fun. So a bit of a random one, perhaps, as someone with my accent. So some other quick background to set this up on me. I grew up with a German mother and a Kiwi father. So I am terrible at understanding most American sports and otherwise. But I grew up with Michael Schumacher in the background and was always a Formula One fan long before Netflix did its docuseries. But I had no one to talk to around me in the US. No one was really aware of it. And so as the series came out and as things were being built, I started looking more into the background, and I became fascinated with Ellie Norman, who was the CMO over at Formula One. And now I believe has gone over to be the chief communications officer at Manchester United. I went deep into a rabbit hole on Ellie, and I think she's great. She's a total storyteller. She is someone who is a marketer who, from the talks I've seen with her, just gives a tremendous amount of trust into learnings that they've done through research and partners that, as she had put it a couple of times, just they know best. So we follow what they say, and you really have to have a bit of a trust fall and learn. And I think that's hard as a marketer. We often think we have the best story and we have it right, and even if it's subconscious. And I think the work that she has done, just with where she had worked from Virgin to Formula One to now with Manchester United, has been really fascinating and just seems to be a great storyteller. And that's what draws me. So if Ellie is around or joins this podcast, I would love to find her at some point.
Wow. Well, we'll put that out there into the ether. We'll send it out to the universe. Let's see what we can make happen. All I ask is if you do hear anything, let me know how that goes. But for anyone listening, just wanting to find out more about all the things we talked about today, maybe check out Nextdoor, contact your team, all those wonderful things. What's the best starting point for them?
Sure. If they head to business.nextdoor.com, if you're in the UK, it will automatically redirect you. I clearly know our US site best there, but that will give you a great overview of Nextdoor as a whole. And it will also bring you to a fabulous insights hub we have that my team's built out all around the great insights that we have for both advertisers and neighbors alike. And of course, if you are looking for the app, you can find us everywhere. Just look for Nextdoor and download and join and find out what's happening in your neighborhood.
As I said at the very beginning of the podcast, I always say technology works best when it brings people together. And I love what you're doing here with Nextdoor. Yes, you've got 75 million users around the world, but it's this trend towards localism that I find absolutely fascinating, and how you're bringing local areas together and helping businesses better serve those communities too. But more than anything, just thank you for taking the time to sit down and share your story today.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure, Neil. Thank you so much.
So a big thank you to Emma for joining us on the podcast today. I'd love to hear your thoughts about the Nextdoor app, the trend towards localism, how they're scaling the concept, and also the technology behind serving 75 million users. That is a lot of neighbourhoods. I'd love to hear your thoughts on anything we discussed today. Equally, if you've got any questions, you want to come on the podcast, all that usual stuff, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram at Neil C. Hughes. Don't just hit follow or send a pitch, though. Tell me you listen to the show. Tell me what you like, what you don't like, what you'd like to see more of, whatever it is. Keep those messages coming in. But that's it for today. So a big thank you for listening as always. And until next time, don't be a stranger.